Welcome, one and all, to the Ferret and Raccoon podcast, episode 164. I am your one and only host for this podcast, the Angry Raccoon, bringing you the first podcast of April 2021. And the first thing I want to say is hopefully everyone had a good Easter, and hopefully everyone is enjoying their holidays if they are indeed on holidays. It's been quite a long one for England, as we've had 2.5 weeks, which has been excellent, especially given the fact that most schools and workplaces have gone back to work, and the whole going back to work process and getting used to the new normal and all that kind of stuff has been a bit taxing on, well, me more importantly, and I guess other people as well. But yeah, I've been enjoying my holidays for the most part. I haven't actually done as much as I would have wanted to that I can talk about on said podcast, mainly because I'm in between a lot of shows I've just started and a few that have just started. So I don't really want to be, telling you about shows that I'm only, episode 1 into. Kind of be a bit pointless. Might as well save it for a podcast where I actually have a lot more to discuss about it. But yeah, the only thing I did manage to watch was a film that's been on my list for a while, and that's going to be the film Overlord. This film came out a couple years ago and is the film not to be confused with the anime, and I think there's another film that came out a couple years before that. But this is surprisingly a pretty good film. It comes from the studio Bad Robot. J.J. Abrams produced it. It's one of those kinds of films, and it's honestly just a really good, solid action, I guess, kind of horror film. And I don't really want to spoil too much about the film because I would, highly recommend people go and watch it if you actually want to see a film, an actual story, something that isn't just, set up for 800 sequels. The basic premise is it essentially follows a bunch of soldiers during World War II who essentially have to destroy a radio tower, or I believe it's a radio blocker, in, I guess, a small little village in France from the Nazis. And what happens is very interesting. I would say if you're a big fan of the that's the wrong thing. If you're a big fan of the Wolfenstein games, or you like alternate histories like The Man in the White Castle, you'll really like this film. It does have its own kind of like unique style and unique pace for a horror action, World War film. It's visually very colorful and very striking. The practical effects are pretty damn good, and it has a pretty original concept if you've never, played a video game, I guess. But it honestly does feel like Wolfenstein the film. So high praise from me. I would highly recommend watching it if you can. Is it the greatest film of all time? No, but it's still a good, solid film, like I said before. But let's move on to some things that happened over the last fortnight. And one thing I want to talk about, which I know a lot of people don't necessarily care too much about video gaming, but this is one thing I guess you can, add to your, knowledge of video gaming. You can press your friends or whatever, but just an interesting thing to note. But Microsoft essentially hired some Japanese VTubers to promote their Xbox Game Pass. Now, this was particularly interesting to see someone like Microsoft even do something like this, because unfortunately, when you do think of Microsoft, you don't necessarily think of something like, cute anime girls for the most part. But this is a really smart way for Microsoft to promote themselves in a country that they've kind of always struggled to break into, being Japan. Xbox and Microsoft is not a very big or popular country over in Japan. In terms of gaming, it's more about Sony and Nintendo for the most part. And as I want to apologize for the phone, but it is interesting that how they've gone about doing this, as well as it's a very smart way to kind of get people talking as well. I mean, I'm talking about it for the most part. And it is interesting because most people either watch or know of VTubers. They essentially look like anime girls. They are essentially using a face recognition / animation software to essentially, copy their movements that they do in real life, which are then translated to this avatar character. And there are quite a few characters that people have enjoyed and, fell in love with for the most part. I mean, just for example, two of my favorite ones are Koroni, who's the dog character. You got Guru, Gura, I believe that's how you say her name. She's a shark. And then you got Snuffy. For obvious reasons, I like her. You just have to look her up and you'll know why. But what I'm essentially saying or getting at is getting VTubers like Bauten and Luna. I'm not going to try and butcher their other names. That's essentially what they're called. And if you want to see their videos in which they do explain and play games via the Game Pass, I'm going to put them in the link in the download description. I'm off it today. I'm going to put it in the download link and the description for you to go and just see what happens. But yeah, it is an interesting way, and it is one of the most relevant ways in which you can advertise yourself, your gaming platform today. And whoever came up with this idea needs a raise. I mean, this new direction that Microsoft/Xbox is taking, is honestly slowly winning me back for the most part, because I've had issues with Microsoft in terms of how they've gone about portraying themselves and how they've gone about games. So, for example, most people know about with the Xbox One and them, having the always online, always listening kind of aspect about it. And then obviously them trying to focus exclusively on first-person shooters during that era, which obviously shot themselves in the foot because, yes, they had all the shooters, but they didn't really have anything else. Nintendo and Sony kind of came in and took that. But it is kind of cool, and I do like, their approach for the most part. I mean, for example, their Twitter account is very natural and very human. They make jokes at the expense of other video game series as well as themselves as well. There was a great tweet I saw where they did a nice comparison where they took the Xbox Series X, they took a fridge freezer, and then they took, I guess, what might be the main villain of Resident Evil 8, the Lady Donistres. They took her and they did a size comparison just to show, that the Xbox Series X isn't as big. Also, another thing I remembered is that Xbox is going to be making fridge freezers shaped like the Series X. So they're literally rolling with that joke, which is really good. That's something I could never see another company doing. Their continued protection and like playability of older games is something that I really respect. The fact that they are, and they also believe that people should be able to play these older games that are on their system is something that I really enjoy, especially given that Sony seems to have no worth for their older games, which is something I talked about on the previous podcast. And it is interesting that when you compare Xbox right now to, let's say, Nintendo, who are just handing out DMCAs left, right, and center, no matter whether you're doing fan art or fan games or just trying to preserve their games, they will just shut you down immediately. Nintendo has always seemed to be about, 7 years behind the current world to some extent. As well as Sony, who's like currently just getting rid of all their Japanese developers and projects in favor of, more Western blockbuster games, which I think is a very piss poor move in my opinion, because Sony is honestly losing their originality and experimentation, the kind of things that made them as successful and as popular as they are. When every game just looks like The Last of Us and God of War, I'm not interested. You need variation. And if Xbox is the one who's going to give variation and give gamers what they want, then so be it. I mean, as I think I said on the end of the year podcast, you can't get a PlayStation 5, but you can get an Xbox Series X. Just always keep that in mind. Let's move on to news stories and that, because we've got a few to talk about, but there's one I mainly want to talk about. And the first one I want to talk about is for the trailer, The Night House. Now, besides its generic name, the film looks promising, given the concepts and the visuals that I'm going to talk about, but at the same time, it could be really stupid if the twist or the explanation is dumb or doesn't work, because it has the potential to be really stupid, as seen in the trailer. But the idea of like a mirror house or a mirror version of yourself is a pretty strong concept for a psychological horror, especially because the film is very relatable. I mean, because in a sense, it's essentially asking this kind of horrific question of, what if you're not alone in your own house? What if the ghosts you think are in your house is actually just you or another you? That's a pretty interesting concept. If they nail it, it could really work, and it could be very, very effective. And there are some very effective ideas and scenes, like, for example, when she opens the door to see another version of herself, and that other version has just seen a door randomly open. I know there's another really weird and interesting visual where there's almost like a human form that has essentially been framed with the, I guess, stuff in the house, which I don't understand how that works, but it's a very interesting visual. Hopefully it has some kind of interesting context. But yeah, I just hope that it doesn't turn into like jump scares and, oh, look, here comes the monster, and all that kind of stuff, which so many films kind of fall under, which is such a shame. But yeah, fingers crossed this one actually is good. I would like to see something a little bit more subtle and a little bit more sticks in the back of your head kind of come out this year and actually be a true horror story. Next trailer we're going to talk about, we're going to kind of get a bit more crazy and a bit more bizarre as this podcast goes on, but the next one is going to be for the film Mainstream, which is, I can't remember the director's name, but I know that she is related to Francis Ford Coppola. I think it's like, I can't remember, but yeah, she's related to Francis and Fiona Ford Coppola. I believe Fiona Ford Coppola is her auntie. But yeah, and that's going to be the trailer for Mainstream, which is a very interesting film, as it seems to be kind of commenting and parodying the sort of influencer, vlogger, mega successful YouTuber kind of culture that is still ongoing in this world. More accurately, it seems to be kind of poking fun at Logan / Jake Paul and his kind of rise to success and failures and all that kind of stuff, which is an interesting thing to see a more mainstream film kind of tackle something that is so debatable, in the sense that, are these YouTubers, these successful people, your KSIs and all that kind of stuff, are these people legitimately creditable in terms of like film and television? I mean, KSI has been on almost every TV show at this point. He's known as a boxer. He's one of the most famous YouTubers. Same with people like PewDiePie. He's appeared on tons of shows. I mean, he's made cameos in so many other things, from Conan O'Brien to South Park and stuff like that. And hopefully this film does delve into aspects and ideas of stuff like that, the longevity and the relevancy of these YouTubers and that kind of stuff. But the trailer itself does kind of portray a very interesting progression of fame and success. It very obviously does showcase the whole, oh, he does random things and it's funny and he gets attention and people love him for that. The name, No One Special was particularly very well done. And just the whole aspect of him, or Andrew Garfield's character, who I think is a fantastic actor and I think is knocking it out the park here, kind of going into this whole aspect of like the corruption and the lies, the fake alter ego, the fake self, which is something you do see kind of come up, like who is the real No One Special, and that's an aspect, an idea I like. I am interested to see how they're going to incorporate all the like emojis and all the effects in there. Hopefully it's not too distracting or too try hard to be relevant, although I do believe relevancy is a big factor of this film. But I am really interested in this film. It definitely has a nice style, and it definitely seems like it's going to be one of those films that does kind of get you thinking, or at least get people talking about this kind of still relatively new culture of media that we still have. Because as much as YouTube is a busted ass system, there are a lot of great creators that really do kind of bend and define what it is to just be a YouTuber / content creator / someone who could legitimately be on TV and have their own TV show. But yeah, really interested in that one. And the next trailer I'm going to talk about is a pretty interesting one, and that is going to be the trailer for Zola, which is based on the tread about the two, now I can't remember the name, so excuse me if I'm quoting this wrong, the two strippers, I believe they were strippers, who they have that wild story that one of them wrote on Twitter, and it eventually became a film, and this is that film about that crazy situation. I would imagine if you don't want spoilers, don't go look up that article, or that thread, sorry. But yeah, this is the film of it. And I think that they're doing a pretty good job in terms of kind of portraying the lifestyle that is, and, you know, don't get angry when I say this, can be considered trashy in a very trashy way. You know, these girls do kind of come across as not necessarily sleazy, but definitely, unfortunately, what you might think a, you know, prostitute or a stripper might act or might be like. But it does have a very interesting visual style. It looks like it's shot on film, but it looks like it's been lit with a almost neon-ish aesthetic, which is really nice. And it is a nice kind of contrast to see this almost hard grain film look, and then someone be on their Twitter, or someone, you know, mentioning, you know, my Tumblr, my Instagram, and that kind of stuff. It should be a very interesting and surreal film, hopefully, and hopefully a tense one. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how they do, how I say, you know, adapt, you know, essentially hearsay or a Twitter thread. But yeah, it looks great. It honestly does look really great, and I am really looking forward to this one. Yeah, it definitely caught me by surprise. It does remind me a lot of the film Spring Breakers, as well as the Florida Project. It definitely has that aspect of focusing on this somewhat glamorized, sleazy, niche kind of group of people, and you don't really see too many films focus on, let's say, you know, strippers or that kind of, you know, darker business, at least the way it is today in the modern era. Sure, there were films about, you know, strippers and that in the past, but like, you know, showgirls and stuff like that, but, you know, not how it's progressed, because obviously now, you know, stripping the profession, it's a lot more glamorous now. It's a lot more profound, a lot more professional. No one really, at least younger people, really hear that you're a stripper and go, ugh. They kind of go, oh, that's really cool. You know, how much money do you make? You know, it's interesting to see that. And hopefully the film does kind of make commentary or comparisons to that whole, you know, situation, because it is coming from a slightly older point of how that profession was viewed. So very interested in this trailer and this film. Hopefully it's good though. I'm kind of hoping that all these films are good. Particularly the last one I'm going to talk about, which is going to be the big one, which is for Space Jam 2, A New Legacy. Now, this is the one. For a lot of people, this is their childhood. Mine too. I like the original Space Jam film that came out in the 90s. It was one of the first films I was really like, whoa, you know. And I was looking forward to this trailer. And now it's here, and now I've watched it a good couple times, because there is a lot to dissect, both in a good way and a bad way. And I'm not talking about like the, oh, did you see the references in the Easter egg? No, I'm not talking about that rubbish. I'm talking about the film at its core and what I feel about it. And honestly, I'm a bit mixed, unfortunately. Now, let's look at the good for the most part. So on one hand, I think LeBron James is giving a great performance, and he's having a lot of fun with it. Like, this is clearly something he wanted to do. It doesn't feel like he's like, I'm gonna act. No, he is having the time of his life. You know, he isn't overacting. He isn't, you know, scenery chewing. He honestly it just seems like LeBron James. Like, you know, like in a good way, it's like he's not acting, if that makes sense. Which I think is great, because he is, you know, literally transported to another world. And that, I also like the 2D art style and animation. I think they did a really good job, you know, with it, as well as including it, because they could have just made them look how they did, because they only really had like one uniform look in the original Space Jam film, which even then the animation I think still holds up. I mean, it was groundbreaking how they did it back in the day, you know, kind of using, I think it was one of the earlier examples of them using kind of green screen people stand-ins, and, you know, people to actually do that kind of stuff. It was one of the first, if I remember correctly, or at least one of the mainstream successful films to do that. A lot of people do that nowadays anyway with practical effects. For example, with The Mandalorian, how they do the little green baby Yoda character, it's usually with that same kind of technique in order to essentially remove the puppeteers out of the shot. But the 2D art style is great, and the 3D CGI animation looks really good. Like, I'm really impressed by how it looks. Like, the look of the Looney Tunes fits so well with their original designs. It fits in with the style of the film, like the lighting, the faithful colors to the original characters, like the very smooth animations that they have, as well as the fur texture on Bugs and Lola is just amazing. Like, it looks like matted fur. Like, it looks like, they or someone has like kind of rubbed their hands through their fur and it's like stayed in place, much like a cat or something like that. Absolutely massive props to the animation texture team on that, because they did a really good job kind of bringing these characters to a 3D environment and making them look like believable to some extent. Like, they don't look like they're real, they look like they're real cartoon characters in this world, which they nailed in my opinion. So I'm really happy and really impressed with that, because that was really one of the major aspects they had to nail, honestly. But on the other hand, almost everything else is a mess in my opinion. Like, I think the biggest issue with this trailer and maybe the film is that it's honestly, there's too much going on. There is way too much going on in this film. And I'll explain. Like, the whole concept of the server room or the serververse has me very confused. Now, this may be a nitpick, and if you want to disregard it as that, fair enough. Maybe it'll get explained in the film, but so far, I don't think it's a great concept, because is the serververse meant to be Warner Brothers Studios? Like, why would all Warner Brothers properties exist in some cosmic serververse? It doesn't quite work for me. Why is the Looney Tunes world in a computer now? Like, I get that they're cartoons, and I guess that, Warner Brothers owns this world, but at the same time, wouldn't it make more sense if it was a literal dimension or planet? I mean, it is called Space Jam at the end of the day. Like, the original film implied that there were aliens in outer space, within the context of the real world. Hence why Michael Jordan was real. I honestly feel like it's just like a very pointless way to update it, because, yeah, I get it. Cyberspace, servers, I get that's what they were going for, but I just don't think it gels as well, because people are naturally going to go back to the first film and go, yeah, but the Looney Tunes, they lived underground in our world. Aliens literally came from space. Why are they now in a computer? It doesn't make much sense. Like, I don't really understand how that's happened or why that's happened, and I feel like it's not going to be explained. I just feel like it's just the directors going, oh, it's got to update it, all that stupidness. And also, by them being in the computer, it also implies that the Looney Tunes themselves are digital as opposed to actual real beings. And if they are digital, that means that they're essentially sentient digital beings now, which is a really odd concept, because that also basically says that they're essentially Digimon as well. So, yeah, that doesn't really gel with me, and I think it's a really stupid thing. I don't understand why they just didn't say that they take place on another planet. It would have made far more sense. I guess the biggest issue I have with this trailer and possibly this film, and this is the one thing that I think can destroy the whole film, and that is the references to Warner Brothers franchises is so overboard and really distracting. Like, why can't it just be a film about the Looney Tunes? Like, I don't get it. Why have we shoved in all the Hanna-Barbera cartoons and all the other film franchises? Like, is it just so people can make videos going, oh, look, there's King Kong, there's Pennywise the Clown, oh, did you see the Iron Giant? Oh, top 10 things you missed in the Space Jam 2 trailer. Have they done it just for that? Just for clicks? It's kind of pathetic, really, if that's the case, because you're really taking away from the core of the series and the core of the film if you just have a bunch of, like, random shit in the background. Even if you recognize the characters, I don't want to see the Iron Giant while I'm watching Space Jam 2. I want to watch Space Jam 2. You know what I mean? I want to see Lola Bunny. More on her in a sec. But the film is in danger of being another Ready Player One or like Funko Pop the movie, with just how they're just shoving all these references in. And Ready Player One was a goddamn awful film for that. Like, just constant references and pop culture in your face. It was awful. And it does kind of feel like they're trying to set up another cinematic universe. They failed with Scoob. to do a cinematic universe. They're trying to do it again here. There's supposedly another HBO Max series that takes place in a Hanna-Barbera world that's meant to be a cinematic universe. Like, literally, just stop, okay? Like, it's, just make a good film. Just make Space Jam 2, that isn't a prequel to 10 more films and franchises. Like, it really is frustrating that very few people can and will just make a film that isn't just pointless setup. And I really hope that this isn't it. I hope there's not going to be a, scene at the end where it's like, oh my god, look, it's Fred Flintstone and he's putting together a basketball team. No, I don't want to see that rubbish. And then we got to address, I guess, the hot topic or the elephant in the room, which is, of course, Lola Bunny and her, got to use my air quotes, redesign. Now, her redesign looks exactly like her to me. Like, it's Lola Bunny. Like, she doesn't look different at all. Like, the only thing that's really different about her is that she's wearing a different uniform that they're all wearing. And here's the thing when it comes to her redesign. I like it. I like the way she looks in this film, personally. I have actually a lot to say about the Looney Tunes 2 film as well as Lola Bunny, but I'm actually going to save that for a possible video or another discussion later on in the podcast, maybe even a review of Space Jam 2, so I'm just going to say this here for now. I really like her look, especially in CGI. I think for some reason, her look works better in CGI. I'm not sure why. I think it might just be the lighting. Something about it just clicks and works for me. Especially that shot of her when she's got her arms out and she's like, yeah, I know I'm the best. That just really works for me. I don't know why. It looks really great. And I guess for those people who are really upset about her new look, I mean, just look up fan art of her. There's like over 20 years, of fan art of her in certain ways, in certain situations. The classic look, if you want to call it that. Or just commission your favorite artist to draw them. Like, I really don't see the issue. Like, Warner Brothers is not destroying the original film. Like, I mean, I'm not even going to get into reasons and politics why they did that. I don't think that's really important. The only thing I am a bit disappointed by is them, once again, removing the character Pepe Le Pew, or I should more accurately say removing a scene with him in it, over fears and pressure because of, commentary and things said about the character, which for those of you who don't know, I think it's mainly based on one idiot essentially writing an article about how he believes that Pepe Le Pew kind of reinforces or is about rape culture, which I think is a ludicrous and very stupid thing to say about a cartoon character, especially when Pepe Le Pew has never really been about that. I've watched every single Pepe Le Pew cartoon, unlike the person who wrote that article, and I find it a bit silly that he's just tried to jump to the most extreme cause in order to, I guess, get people talking. These kinds of people, I really hate the people who try and do this kind of stuff to get attention and to try and get people upset on Twitter over things that are important. I mean, has Pepe Le Pew aged well? No. He's a stereotypical Frenchman. Like, he's not aged well. Does that mean we should get rid of him? No, not at all. I mean, there's some racist stuff in Tom and Jerry, but we still made a new film about them. No, that stuff needs to be referenced and it needs to be known about. But at the same time, you put that in the past, okay? You acknowledge it and you move on. You bring Pepe Le Pew back as a character, but you don't make him how he was back then, simply put. That's my little gripe on the whole situation. I think it was a bit silly for them to remove a whole scene of him from the film. Hopefully that scene makes its way online or on the Blu-ray, because I would like to see that, especially if it was animated well. I won't say what happens in the scene, just in case people don't want spoilers, but yeah, that's a bit disappointing that they're, bowing to pressure. I find that stuff very silly sometimes, especially when it's in regards to a cartoon character. I mean, if Pepe Le Pew was racist and that was his joke, I would get it. I understand that he is a bit full on when it comes to the was it? I forget the character's name. The cat that he believes is a skunk, but even still, I do find that stuff just be a bit pathetic at the end of the day. But then again, Twitter is a toxic wasteland. But yeah, that's my 2 cents on Space Jam 2. At the end of the day, I am looking forward to it. I hope it's not as bad as I think it's going to be. The comparisons I made to Ready Player One honestly do worry me, because it makes me think that any other time we're going to see a Hanna-Barbera cartoon is going to be like this, and it's going to be like, oh well, I should actually rephrase, the Looney Tunes aren't Hanna-Barbera, so anytime we see a Warner Brothers cartoon property, it's going to be in some gimmicky crossover rubbish. Like, I honestly think Warner Brothers doesn't know what to do with these characters. And I mean, clearly they don't, because just look at Scoob. It was a mess. But yeah, that's pretty much going to wrap up this podcast for the most part. I am going to leave you with the video of the episode, which is going to be in honor and respect to the late rapper DMX, who unfortunately passed away over the last couple of days. Very tragic and sad to have another rapper who is as iconic as he is, unfortunately pass away over the last few days. It is very sad to hear and see, and my thoughts go out to his fans, which I am one of, and his family and friends. I wanted to leave you guys with DMX with X Gon Give It To You. You know, one of his most popular and most successful songs. I think most people have probably heard this song just through reference, just through meme culture. And yeah, definitely go look up some of his other songs if you've never really heard anything past this song. But I do love DMX as a rapper, because at the time and still today, he had such an aggression and such a passion for rapping. Like, he had a very great raspiness to the way he rapped. And although his flow was slow, there was always intent behind it. And I think that's something that's going to be missed and something you just don't see today. But yeah, I guess I'll wrap this podcast up like I always do by saying I was the Angry Raccoon, and I will see you on the next podcast.